Greetings. Back with the video. Was traveling recently south of the Mason Dixon line, and just wanted to show some of my finds. So we'll get started with a few things. First, I did want to say thank you to Bo, Mr. Earhead6. Sent me the American Revolution. This is on flip disc. I think as far as with the catalog number, oops, on this side, I believe the album that comes before this is actually the Boston Tea Party. So I'm kind of excited to listen to this. Haven't gotten a chance yet to, but I have a feeling it's kind of like psych pop kind of thing. So very cool. Thank you, Mr. Bell. So this trip, unlike last year, which I kind of did the same thing, I was really kind of very specific about what I was buying. Last year I pretty much hit every thrift shop that I came in encounter with, and it just was a super long trip. And I found some good stuff, and I kind of thought about sort of in the grand scheme of things that sometimes, you know, if you make that stop at the thrift shop, that you may not find anything. Obviously, that's the nature of the beast, but sometimes it's not worth that, 20 minutes stopping every step along the way. So I basically have about 3 or 4 different things I wanted to show, 3 or 4 different shops that I went to. The first one, I got some really cool stuff. This was actually like right off the bat in the first day. I got a handful of 45s and then also a few LPs. So I'll show the LPs first. This is just a really clean copy of Songs of Leonard Cohen. I had like a 70s Columbia issue and then also like a modern reissue. But this is a 2-eye Columbia. Just pretty excited to have a really clean copy like this. Still in the shrink and everything. So that was $7 for that, which I think is well below what the going rate for this is. I picked up, now this one was a little more expensive. This was $15. But The Sermon by Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith stuff, you always see that Verve stuff. It's, look how clean this is. Blue Note. It's like a brand new record. This is just a great LP. You hardly really don't see this one that often. But I was really excited to find that. So $15 is okay. For what I saved on the Lenny Cohen, this kind of, for the 2, 22 for the pair. That was a pretty good deal. Then also I got all these 45s. Most of these were $1.99 to $2.99. So usually when I find a picture sleeve for that price, I'm going to pick it up. Beach Boys, Fun, Fun, Fun. We have 409 and Surf and Safari. This is an EP, which it's kind of funny because I don't usually, I don't know how many of these EPs that they did. This one is 4 by the Beach Boys. Put that focus in there. Little Honda, Wendy, Don't Back Down, and Hushabye. Yeah, this is $1.99 for that one. Darlin', Here Today. Same thing on both sides for that one. This one's cool. Had to pick that one up. Sloop John D. Yeah, just super mint. Well, not totally mint, but in good shape. Tommy James and the Shondells. Say I Am, Lots of Pretty Girls on Roulette. Same on both sides. I got a couple here from the Lovin' Spoonful. Did You Ever Have to Make Up Your Mind? B-side. Summer in the City. Butchie's Tune is the B-side of that. Nashville Cats. This is a double, so I'm going to probably send some out to some folks. Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, How Do You Catch a Girl? You never really see these on 45. You obviously just see the LP. Paul Revere and the Raiders featuring Mark Lindsay, A Good Thing, and Undecided Man. Same on both sides. And the last one, this is probably maybe the third copy or so I found of this. This is just one that, I mean, I don't see it that often, but definitely put it on your radar if you see it. This is on Destination Records. It's the Crying Shame, so this is actually before they went to Columbia. And that's Sugar and Spice, which is on the Nuggets compilation, but, it would later be on, it's kind of hard to show that one, but it would be on I believe that one was on Columbia. I think they put that on their album when it was produced. But this was kind of the 45 that I think came out before they had an album, true album. The next stop, I got 3 LPs. Just kind of, again, I was real focused on kind of what I was getting. So I tried not to get, quality over quantity kind of thing going. I just wanted to make sure I was getting the quality stuff rather than coming home with a ton of records. So this is a Private Press North Country. So I don't know if they're local or what. Autographed by all the members of the band. The thing that I usually, when I find records like this, they're actually from Western Canada, so it's not actually a local record. But there's a lot of contemporary covers on it. So usually, anytime I find privately pressed records, I always kind of look for that because those usually lead to something that's at least some sort of an interesting listen. And I also snagged these 2. The first one was $8. Hootenanny Tonight on Folkways. Folkways is the label. Anything I find on it usually is pretty good. So, except sometimes there's some of the kind of the the whole point of Folkways was sort of to preserve music. So, this is just a great. It really is not. I mean, Sonny Terry's on this one. Also Leon Bibb, who wrote Goodnight Irene, Pete Seeger. So it was cool to pick that one up. And this one, I'm really excited to get this one. So this is the New Lost City Ramblers, songs from the Depression. So the New Lost City Ramblers were sort of kind of kicked off the folk movement. They were kind of the truest of the folkies. Really, all their music was very, period sort of thing. They did a lot of stuff off of the Anthology of American Folk Music and things like that. So that was $10 for that one. So very cool. No splits on it or anything. So I love it finding these folkways. Next stop, I hit up an antique store and I kind of found some weird stuff. You know how antique stores can really be real hit or miss. Most of these records were, amongst copies of Hot August Night for $20, and I'll segue a little bit on this too, but the mindset of collecting records, you definitely get to a point where, if you have all the Led Zeppelin stuff, you have all the, the Doors stuff, it gets to a point where you have all those common rock records, Pink Floyd, you're not really looking for those records. So what I find myself looking for is I find myself looking for those things that are almost like the people didn't know what they had. So, I was finding tons of cool stuff, but, just not in good shape. And so, again, I was being very choosy on what I was purchasing. But, every once in a while you just find these things that that you've sort of basically they didn't have eBay pulled up or they didn't Google. This was the one thing that they didn't Google, and that's especially when it comes to antique stores. Usually you have, sometimes it's just frustrating. But for me, stopping at an antique mall and maybe spending 2-3 hours walking through the entire thing, just combing it for, you just know kind of where to look for the records and things like that. Sometimes it's worth it because every once in a while you find those things, like I said, that people have just not paid enough attention to, that they kind of have some value to you. First thing I found was Porter Wagner and Dolly. We found it. Now you're probably saying to yourself, "Oh, that's a really common record," but this one's actually a German pressing. So usually, any time that I find German records or any type of import, Especially when you're paying regular price, I'm talking $1, whatever. I probably paid $1 for my other copy that I have. But when you find this one, that's sort of that one, hey, they were over in Germany and they found this record because they brought it back for somebody who really liked Porter Wagner and Dolly Parton and whatever. Or they sent it over, they were stationed in Germany and they sent it over to their family, whatever. I don't know. These are always very cool to find. I always like, even if it's a common record, finding an import is kind of an exciting thing. I found this, and this was sort of like a mind blower because this was one of those ones that was amongst all of those, all of the sort of silly common records, Velvet Gloves and Spit and Tapestry and records that you've seen thousands of times. But it's like this is the one time you've seen this record out in the wild, and it's really cheap. Tangerine Dream, I think it's Zeet, I'm not sure. I'm not really, the hugest fan by any means. I know Andy, a guy that used to comment a lot on my channel. I don't know if he's still doing the whole YouTube thing, but he was a big Tangerine Dream fan. But this is supposed to, this is like their third album, so this is a very kind of a critically acclaimed album, kind of the Tangerine Dream that anybody can listen to. I'm not the biggest prog fan. I think anybody knows that by watching my videos, but pretty excited to hear this. This is just, definitely a chill out record for sure. But again, this was tucked in amongst all those. I believe this is also like let me see here if this is a German pressing of this. I'm thinking this is like a 78 pressing from what I kind of looked up. Anybody out there that cares to help on that, they can. I'll see if I can on my phone zoom in if this will focus or not. But there's sorry for doing that to you. That's, I think, what the original one would look like. It would have the two twins virgin on there. That would have been the original one. But I don't know. For the price, again, I'm going to snag that. You see. So that was it from the antique store. I'm sorry, there's one more. A couple, actually, two more things. So this is one, again, you've seen the John F. Kennedy Memorial albums. One of you found a Lee Harvey Oswald album. So this album's kind of funny. It, from the outside of it, it really doesn't disclose what's on the inside. Revealed in his own words, the man nobody knows. Spectacular historical document, the only recorded interview. So this was recorded just a few weeks, maybe in 3 months, I think, or something like that, before the actual assassination, which is pretty cool. Not the assassination, but the actual recording of it. But he's talking about fair play for Cuba. I guess he was arrested for disturbing the peace. It's just an interesting sort of spoken word kind of thing. It's on Truth Records. The truth is out there. From America's Greatest Patsy. So, again, I can't pass up something like that. I thought that was totally cool. Here's two other things, and this kind of segues into part of two little things that went on during that trip. I did do a lot of reading. I read 2 books while I was there, which I really don't have a lot of time to read, which is something I think I want to change after this. I want to do a little more reading. But I snagged 2 78s. These are by Vernon Dalhart. Vernon Dalhart was sort of like a early country balladeer kind of guy. Wrote a lot of country ballads, Wreck of the Old 97, things like that. This is Old Gray Mare and Little Brown Jug. This is on Perfect Records, which they kind of have like a brownish color to them. The paper sleeve that they're in are not for the right one, but they're cool. They're not, no splits in the bottom, anything like that. Cool piece of American history. And then I also got this one I'm a little more excited about. Was this has Where They'll Never Grow Old, which Smith's Sacred Singers, they do a version of that on the Anthology of American Folk Music. So these are only a couple of bucks. So I love even just kind of flipping through, looking at 78s, things like that, because there's so every once in a while you might find something fairly interesting. And it kind of segues into this. So I did read this book, Do Not Sell at Any Price, The Wild Obsessive Hunt for the World's Rarest 78 Records. This is a pretty good read. I would probably say it's, depending on kind of your take on things, probably either like a buy or a borrow. It does give you a nice perspective on sort of the obsessive collecting of 78, which I feel is even further beyond what LP collecting is. It's, because sometimes 78 just can change hands for, silly money, really. The book's pretty well written. It's kind of broken into a couple of different parts. Obviously, it's a nonfiction book. The writer basically meets up with some of the key players in the 78 sort of community. And it has parallels to regular collecting. They don't disclose where they go. They don't talk about their who they buy records from, their methods, things like that, which is fairly common to regular vinyl folks. Part of the book, the beginning of the book, sort of is more so interviewing, learning about things. Middle of the book, it becomes sort of this thing of where Amanda becomes very obsessed with these myths that are around 78s. They talk about sort of Paramount, this factory. I think it's in, I want to say, Wisconsin, and they talked about that they would just throw records into the river once the plant closed. And she goes scuba diving, trying to find some of these, because and it talks about an interesting kind of perspective on how some of these records are. There's maybe only 3 copies of them in existence, and once they're gone, they're gone. And they talk about how that starting a collection of 78s at this stage of the game is pretty much impossible, because the known copies that exist are out there. If it is, it's people are unearthing records that are in people's attics. But most of the 78 community, I would say the big time was in the 60s. And then most of this music isn't documented. There's stuff that there's maybe one song and that's it. And they talk about sort of the parallels between that. Most of the really serious collectors kind of duplicate and have labels where they put out music. They talk about the Yazoo label, some other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head, but it's definitely worth picking up. Part of the book in the late middle part kind of gets a little more so historical, how 78s were made, things like that. I don't know necessarily if they needed to be kind of peppered into the book, but otherwise, like I said, it's good. Bought this at a kind of a local bookshop when I was looking for the Kim Gordon new book, and they had this instead, and I said, hey, I'll support you guys. So, cool read. So definitely pick that up. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about real quick, and I know you've been with me for 18 minutes, probably fast forwarding, not watching it beginning to end. But this sort of soundtracked my entire week. This came out not Friday, but the Friday before. The Grateful Dead, the definitive live story, 30 Trips Around the Sun. This is kind of the companion to the 83,000 CD box set that they released for like $700. This has one song from each year from their live shows, and it documents all 30 years. It's a pretty cool package. Obviously, the first 2 discs, this last song on the second disc ends in 1980. So obviously, you have most of the the real hot Grateful Dead, if you will, on the first 2 discs. But there's still a lot of good songs on here. The Dancing in the Street from 1970 is really good, like a 10-minute version of that. The Not Fade Away from 1988. Again, another very cool sort of interplay with the audience, kind of how I remembered it from Chicago. And they kind of cheat a little bit with A Lost Sailor, Saint of Circumstance. There's a few tracks that aren't really that common, which I think was kind of cool. Basically the number 1 track is the on disc 1, number 1. The Caution Do Not Step on the Tracks is like the first earliest recording ever of the Grateful Dead, which is from November of '65. There's Doing That Rag has sort of the same, if you have an original version of Oxamoaxa, it sort of has an a cappella kind of thing at the end. Same thing with, I believe it was Franklin's Tower, has a weird kind of a cappella ending. So each one of these tunes are kind of, they're supposed to be like the best song or something notable, something that you don't hear that often. So, you know, there's some good stuff. Comes a Time, which is one that's not that often. A High Time from 91. Ramble on Rose from 1990, which is, you know, again, something that's fairly rare if you're familiar with the whole Grateful Dead live stuff. So the way that it is it sort of there's a booklet, and then these 4 CDs like that. And the booklet is actually really cool. It has an essay for each one of the songs, so it's, you know, fairly comprehensive. You know, a little paragraph about each one. The other notable thing is, you know, from '75, which was actually when they had their hiatus. There is one of the tunes from one of the 4 shows that they played that year. They didn't play that many. Really, the first 2 I think were actually like Jerry Garcia and Friends, as it was billed. But the one from '75 was the Franklin's Tower. And then '74 was actually from their European tour with the Wall of Sound, which was, you know, very cool. Uncle John's band from that. And then, of course, you know, while I was listening to that, I read this. I know this has been out for a little bit, but Deal, My 3 Decades of Drumming, Dreams, and Drugs with the Grateful Dead by Bill Kreutzmann. It was a pretty good read. I kind of like had a very weird, reflective kind of couple of hours after I finished. I banged it out in about 3 days. It was a very good book. I mean, obviously the bulk of the book is written, you know, from your 1964, 1965-ish through, 1980, and then, you know, the last, probably that much is about, you know, 80 to 95, and then the last bit, you know, the modern thing. It's very cool. I suggest, perfect gift for any Deadhead. It's an interesting take on Bill's story of kind of where he really, if you think about his role as just being a drummer and not, he didn't make any solo albums, anything like that. You know, he kind of helped out on Jerry and obviously Bob's solo album, but when there wasn't music to be played as the Grateful Dead, he really wasn't doing anything until the Dead were kind of defunct in 95. There's a few things where he kind of hooked up with the other ones, and kind of talks about why he likes guitarists that don't emulate Jerry, and I guess there was a lot of concern about that with Warren Haynes and some of the guys that they had tried to play, and how that they could never really be like Jerry. They had their own style. They weren't emulating Jerry, but at the same time they weren't really kind of willing to take chances and things like that. So a very interesting book. Definitely worth picking up. I believe it's going to be out on paperback pretty soon too, so if you don't get the hardback. So that's it for me. I'll probably see you in a couple of days, so take care. Thanks for watching.